Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Promoting Digital Wellness. We are so thrilled to have Tammy Sisk and Bethany Deemers joining us today for their expertise. Just a little bit on Tammy. She's been in the FCPS community for 27 years. She earned a BS in education from the University of Pittsburgh and a master's degree in educational technology from George Mason University. She is an educational technology specialist in the Office of Pre-K-12 Curriculum and Instruction, and one of her roles in the division focuses on building a culture of shared responsibility for digital citizenship across FCPS with staff, students, and parents. And Bethany hails from Buffalo, New York, and she's making me say, go Bills. But she attended SUNY Geneseo for her undergraduate degree in psychology and earned her master's and certificate of advanced study in school psychology at Alfred University. She began her career as a school psychologist in FCPS 16 years ago. Bethany currently serves as the mental wellness specialist for FCPS. She is a youth and teen mental health first aid trainer and enjoys training families, staff, and students across the county. Bethany has always had a passion for promoting wellness through student engagement. And I'm going to turn it over to our lovely presenters. And again, we're thrilled to have everyone joining us today.
So good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. I'm really happy that you're here because I hope that this information that we're going to share today can empower you as parents to help your kids grow up to be healthy, ethical, responsible, and safe users of technology. It's a passion of mine, and I hope it will become a passion of yours too. So to begin with, I want to review some of our outcomes for today. We're going to begin with some information just to help us understand why our technology is so irresistible to us. I think having some of that understanding will empower you as a parent to help your child. So we're going to talk a little bit about the attention economy and personalization algorithms. And then Bethany is going to walk you through differentiating between typical adolescent development versus when should we start to get concerned. We're going to talk about some strategies for supporting your child at home. And then we have some takeaway resources that we will be sending you off with. But to begin with, we're going to start with a quick 3-minute video to just kind of set the stage for our first part of our discussion today.
They can't stop looking at social media.
Their brains have changed.
They become addicted.
And there's something very dangerous about that.
The number one problem, the number one psychiatric disorder among teenagers is anxiety. Typically, it's anxiety about needing to check in with social media.
There's another study that looked at fear of missing out, and it looked at kids who have high anxiety around missing out. Even though social media makes them more anxious, makes them more worried about missing out, they can't stop looking at it. That prefrontal cortex hasn't developed enough for them to be able to put it down, to say to themselves, it's not making me feel good.
The prefrontal cortex, this area of the brain that is involved in our cognitive control, our ability to process and direct our attention based on our goals, is the last part of our brain to develop.
This doesn't get completely myelinated until you're in your mid to late 20s.
So kids are getting these tools right when they have the least capability of actually controlling their behavior.
I think we can confidently say that it's changing the way that teens interact with each other, with peers, with the world, and that those changes in interactions lead to sort of changes in behaviors, changes in psychiatric and sort of mental health.
We should not be surprised. And it's not just because the culture changed. It's because their brains have changed. They also get trained in instant gratification by these devices. And there's something very dangerous about that because in real life, we don't get everything that we want instantly.
They are bombarding our teenagers and our young adults with so much that they become addicted to the continuous input of stimulus and information.
We know that there are many activities that are critical for our development: face-to-face communication, physical activities, exposure to nature, and sleep. I would say that all of these are being threatened in some way by increasing access to information technology.
I think parents are in a really tough situation right now. I think because this tech has negative effects, they have to balance between trying to protect their kids, but also, let's face it, there's tremendous social pressure to use technology. And it's also incredibly important that children are technically literate. And I think there need to be more resources that help them make those decisions. And frankly, the companies need to be partially responsible, largely responsible, for ensuring that the use of these products is responsible.
Okay, so that is kind of an overview of what we're going to dive a little deeper into next. So I want you to read the quote that's on this slide. A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. This is a quote by Herbert Simon, who is a psychologist, an economist, and a Nobel laureate. And when he was thinking about our economy today, what he said was the degree to which we're able to give our full attention limits what we can perceive and what we can do. And he suggests too that multitasking is a myth, because in today's world, information is not what is scarce, but our attention is. And so our attention is what tech companies are after, because that's what's scarce. So we're going to spend a little bit more time on the attention economy. Let's talk a little bit about traditional advertising versus personalized advertising. So think back to when you were young. We were all exposed to advertising back then too. But the difference is traditional advertising was done on television or in physical newspapers that we held, magazines, billboards we drove past, and it was really straightforward. Everybody saw the exact same ads. And those ads didn't feed data back to advertisers about who saw them. But social media is really different. It has a lot of advantages that make advertising, which is persuasion, much, much more powerful than what we were exposed to when we were young. So you've probably heard the term artificial intelligence right now. What it does is it uses what we look at and what we click on to predict what to show us next to keep us engaged so that we keep scrolling, swiping, and sharing it with other people. So essentially it helps them to help us do their work for them, which also brings us to the next point, which is it has 24/7 influence. Because the advertisers can now deliver custom content to us, they can influence our thoughts and behavior anytime we're online, and people are online a lot. Sometimes around the clock. They use a personalized profile of what we share with other people, what we click on, the videos we watch, what we buy, what we're interested in. And what's interesting about this, and really important for parents to understand, your kids have a very different internet experience than you do because they have very different interests than you do. So it means we really have to be in touch and talking with and monitoring and using technology with our children to really understand what it is they're being shown and exposed to, because it is personalized to them and their interests and what they've clicked on. And I don't want to sound very all negative, because it can be really, really helpful. Like lately I've been trying to learn how to decorate cakes. And so I've been looking up cake decorating techniques and equipment and different things like that. Well, now I'm getting fed lots of really helpful videos. And I'm so grateful for that, because I don't have to go hunt for them. And I'm actually learning more than probably I would have had I not had that personalization. The same might happen for a carpenter who's learning woodworking, or, if you're buying a dress for a special occasion, it's going to send you more dresses in the styles that you like. But everything has a positive and a negative side. So we have to also consider how, especially with children, when something might begin with a very innocent internet search, like maybe they heard some friends talking about a drug, or they become curious about sex, but they're not really comfortable yet talking with you or a trusted adult. And so they begin to search for those kinds of things. Now they're going to be fed more of that kind of information, but what we don't have control over is whether what they're connected to, whether it's information or people, whether it's going to be healthy or unhealthy, true or false. And the truth is it's going to be a mixture, which is why media literacy is so very important. So we don't have control over that unless we're with them and we're helping them to understand what they're seeing and experiencing online. Personalization also really affects our social lives. Many people have talked about the Wall Street Journal article that came out last year about young girls and their self-esteem because of Instagram and all the filtered images that they see and trying to live up to this idea of perfection of what they should look like. So, if you show interest in those things, you're going to get more of those things. If you friend someone, you're going to see more of that friend's posts. And if they're using those filters, you're going to feel more pressure to also use those filters. So it kind of feeds itself. There's also that fear of missing out, which Bethany is going to talk a little bit more about later. That's a tremendous thing that can impact the well-being of young people. And then something that's impacting the whole world is this perception that the world agrees with us. Whatever it is we think, we get connected to information that's the same and people who think the same way that we do. And so our thinking is reinforced rather than challenged, which limits our ability to grow as people. And then to make matters even a little bit worse, we have subscribe buttons on YouTube, and we have friends and follows on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And then once you do those things, you're fed more of that through those subscriptions and follows and all of that too. And the thing is, anybody in the world can set up an account and have that opportunity to influence millions of people. So we have to really choose what we're engaging with very carefully, and we have to choose to seek out information that challenges what our thinking is in order to stay a well-rounded individual, rather than living in those filter bubbles that are created. So I want you to think about what's on the screen here, and not to scare anybody, but this is the truth of the internet, right? Loads of amazing content for learning, yet we have all of these risks: violence, drug use and sales, lots of upsetting news stories, pornography, human trafficking and predators, trolls, hate speech, cyberbullying, lots of false information, and even recruitment now for terrorist organizations, which is happening more and more in online gaming, especially violent online gaming. So think about all these potential exposures and what I just shared about the attention economy and how advertisers connect us through algorithms to things that we've shown interest in. And again, it might not have started as a serious interest, right? It might have just been a curiosity search, but now you're being fed more of it, which can lead kids down rabbit holes. So take a look here. This is actually some of the demographics that Facebook sells to advertisers. So they collect information around our education, our finance, our life events like birthdays, weddings, births, deaths, our relationships, the kinds of entertainment we enjoy, the people we have relationships with, what food we like, what drinks we like, what hobbies we have, the sports we play or are interested in, and the list goes on. So this is what is driving us to have such an irresistible attachment to technology, because what we love, we're given more of, and so we stay there. Next, I want you to think about this. the people that create these online platforms don't have a lot of incentive to design them for kids because their role is to make money. They are not designed with adolescence in mind. And so we have to make sure that we're being vigilant to be selective about the products and services our kids are using. And we also have to be vigilant about the settings and the parental controls that we're using. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And then we've got the filter bubbles that happen as a result of YouTube. And I get more questions about YouTube from parents than probably any other product out there. So you know that kids love watching the same kinds of videos over and over again. And then they get suggested videos on the right. And then before you know it, your kid's down the rabbit hole. They've spent 3 hours online. They're crying when you try to get them off the computer. I think all of you can relate to what I'm saying there. Excuse me for just a minute while I take a drink. Okay, so again, those filter bubbles are created on YouTube, which is a highly engaging platform for kids. So a little bit of computer code tracks what they're looking at, how long they stay on it, and then they try to maximize the amount of time that they can keep you on there to expose you to more advertising. I want you to know that in Fairfax, we have taken steps to make sure that this doesn't happen. Many of you have, or hopefully all of you, were given communication about parental permissions for Google additional services and some of the other tools that we use in Fairfax. When you give permission for your child to use YouTube, we actually have the ability to control YouTube much better than because kids will then log into YouTube. This does not mean your child can have a channel or upload videos or comment on anything. They cannot. But when they log in, YouTube knows that they're a part of our domain, and we block the related videos, and we also give them a much more strict filtered experience of YouTube. They don't have access to everything. So if you have questions about that, I do encourage you to talk with your school about it and ask them some more questions, because it is much better to have your child log in than to not. And our teachers rely on a lot of the content that's on YouTube because it's amazing educational content that would be pretty much unaffordable to purchase and create the same types of resources that we would buy. So it's kind of a balancing act, but we've done a lot to try to make YouTube much more education focused in FCPS. So to tie up this conversation about the attention economy, it's important that we remember that social media apps are in a race for our attention. And because of that, they promote more provocative content, more attention grabbing content. And in turn, that sends a message to kids that the more provocative and attention grabbing you can make a post, the more likely it is to be shared or commented on. And this leads to the construction of a much less authentic version of ourselves. So again, it's those filters and the way that we, try to create the perfect vision of what our life is online, that can lead to social comparison. And social comparison can leave many of us, adults included, feeling inadequate. And so these are important things to talk with your kids about. And it also limits what we see because algorithms don't show you everything, right? They're going to show you what you want to see. And that really limits our ability to learn. So to transition over to Bethany, I'm going to read this quote from a 14-year-old girl from St. Louis, Missouri, who says, "I really struggled when I looked in the mirror after joining social media. I'm too fat. I have ugly features. My neck is too long. My hair isn't framing my face correctly. I overthought every word that I spoke for fear of being unliked by someone. It was always something. And it still comes back every once in a while. I also have seriously struggled with depression and anxiety that I never had before social media. So again, as I mentioned before, females are more likely to have issues with self-esteem as a result of social media, which can lead to depression and anxiety. And their pattern of experiences, this is not unique to Morgan, this child. This is a pattern that shows up again and again. And it's traces back to kids feeling pressure to show that perfect life online, to get more attention. It's that attention economy that's at the root of a lot of these challenges. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bethany next, and she's going to be talking about typical adolescent development versus when you should start to be concerned. So Bethany, I'll pass it over.
Yes. Thank you so much, Tammy, and good morning, everyone. I have to say I have the pleasure of working with Tammy occasionally, and I always learn something from her, and we do work together quite a bit because so much of this is intertwined when it comes to our wellness, but also technology use. So when we talk about adolescent development, it does play into technology use, how young people are able to manage technology use or struggle to manage their and monitor their use of technology. But also we're going to talk about kind of why it's important to understand typical adolescence when you're looking at more concerning warning signs and behaviors, when to be worried and when to kind of reach out for support. When we talk about typical adolescent development, it's a period when a young person develops from a child into an adult. And this is typically between the ages of 10 and 19. And it does vary across cultures, how we look at adolescent development, how maybe we celebrate those changes. And so it's important to know that everybody kind of looks at this from a different lens. It can be very positive, but it can be very challenging, both for young people, but also for their families. So typical adolescent development, we look at 4 main areas. Social development. Let's talk about what happens between those stages, those ages of 10 to 19. So young people, it is very typical to experiment with different identities. This is the time of when we're finding who we are as a person. You might notice that your child shifts different peer groups, or they're trying to find kind of that niche where they fit. Again, when we're thinking of social development, think about how in person that might look like one thing, but online, depending on that algorithm that Tammy was referencing, or depending on what you are seeing in your feed, it may shift what your identity looks like. It's also when you're becoming more aware of your identity and who you are. There's an increase in peer influence, for better or worse. So again, when I was growing up, this was all peer influence that was happening face to face. Now there's that interpersonal interactions when we are face to face, but also those influences that come from the internet. And then we're learning how to manage relationships. So it's what we observe in our household, but also what we're seeing at school. And then again, how much is technology feeding into how we learn how to manage relationships. When we're looking at emotional development, this is one of those hard things. Moods shift quickly, and this is very typical. So it's hard sometimes to parse out when we should be worried about those mood changes versus when it's kind of a normal behavior. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. We are developing that ability to empathize with others and understand other perspectives. When I think about what Tammy just shared, if I am only seeing one side of things because of the algorithm that I'm watching, I'm not necessarily, that I've been exposed to, I'm not necessarily understanding lots of different perspectives because I'm only being exposed to one side of things. We're learning how to resolve conflicts, for, again, whether we're doing this in a positive way or we're struggling to do so. Those interpersonal interactions impact this, but so does technology. And we're learning to recognize and manage emotions. When we look at physical development, this is often what we think about when we're reflecting on adolescence, but there are a lot of hormonal changes. We might see that increase in muscle mass, weight, and height. And young people are developing secondary sex characteristics. So when we're thinking about how others view us and what image of self we're portraying through social media, adolescents are becoming hyper-focused on what they look like and how they appear. And again, that's adults too, but it's even more prominent in adolescence. And as far as our cognitive development, we have a heightened focus on our appearance and social acceptance, which I've talked about a little bit. You're forming your own beliefs. So again, if you have that algorithm and you're only seeing a certain perspective or point of view, your beliefs are going to be a bit biased. And are our beliefs being impacted more by what we see online versus what we see at school or what we are learning at home? And we're also using more logic and reason in decision making. But, and Tammy's going to go to the next slide, these are all things that are developing as our brain develops. And our brain develops at kind of a different pace than I think sometimes we recognize. Our brains are not fully developed until the age of 25. So I have noticed sometimes we have expectations of young people that might be a little bit unreasonable. So if we're thinking about our prefrontal cortex, that's this part of our brain. It's the part of our brain that helps us make good decisions and prioritize. It allows us to think before we act. Nobody in K through 12 schools has a fully intact prefrontal cortex that allows us to kind of self-monitor and make decisions where we're thinking through all of the consequences of our actions. Instead, tweens and teens are using different parts of their brains, which aren't great at thinking through consequences. So when we think about technology use in the context of social media, that might mean that a young person is posting a picture that's embarrassing to themselves or might be hurtful to someone else because they haven't been, their brain is not able to fully process their actions and how that might impact themselves or someone else. When it comes to gaming, it might mean that we're playing games all night instead of doing homework or getting enough sleep. So being able to monitor, wow, I've been doing this for 6 hours, I should probably shut down, I have other priorities, it's not something we can just expect young people to know how to do. And this is where families are so important in supporting their youth in being able to shut down, turn things off, setting time restrictions on how much we are using video games or cell phones. And also our brains and typical adolescent development, we see situations, young people see situations as final and forever. So that means if somebody makes a cruel comment toward a 16-year-old female based on what their appearance was in a post that they had online, it might feel like they're never going to come back from that, which can lead to some significant feelings of hopelessness or that anxiety. And so even though we as adults may recognize that this is temporary, kids are going to move forward and forget about that post, to your child, they may not feel that way, and that can have a lasting impact. So, and as tweens are developing that ability to see others' perspectives, which is a very important skill, with that increased focus on peer approval, it also means being preoccupied with others, what others think about them. So I remember working with a young person who had posted something completely inappropriate online, and they looked at me and said, but I did it for the likes. And so not being able to think through how that might impact them as far as discipline at school or issues with the law, they were doing something because they wanted that positive social feedback. Social media can also play into insecurities around other people's opinions, and so can in-game chat. So keeping in mind, we need to support our young people as they're making decisions around social media because their brains don't allow them to do this independently. It's a skill we develop. I even think about as an adult, sometimes I have to, there's that temptation when I feel my phone vibrate. I'm at work, I want to check that immediately, but I need to maybe shut things off on my phone so that I'm not distracted by that. And that's hard for adults. So of course, it's going to be even more challenging for our youth. So when we look at this, we're looking at a huge growth in use of media and technology. And this has obviously increased over time, but we see that media use for tweens and teens has grown significantly since the start of the pandemic. So we're looking at hours of screen time use here, total, and for entertainment. It's not necessarily a bad thing when we think about the pandemic in my point of view, because especially early in the pandemic when we were kind of on lockdown and kids were not accessing each other face-to-face through school or other activities, technology served a very significant role in helping kids, but also adults, connect with others. Social connection is really important. So there are aspects of technology use that can be really positive. It gave us a way to interact with others, to learn certain skills. I know that students had said to me, oh, I taught myself to cook, I taught myself to bake, I taught myself to cross stitch, and it was all the internet that helped them pick up those new skills. So there was some positive impact when it came to that increase in time spent online. But when we look at screen time in FCPS, and I know this chart is small, I know you're going to get a copy of the slide deck, which you might be able to see this a little bit better. But in Fairfax, we administer a survey in partnership with the health department that looks at different healthy behaviors, but also risky behaviors, because it helps us drive interventions. It helps us see where our students are and what they're doing. It's an anonymous survey, and so we'll dive into this a little bit more later, but it does look at screen time use outside of like educational materials. So we're looking at video games or using a computer for non-academic purposes on a school day. So 1 in 9 Fairfax County students in 8th, 10th, and 12th grade report spending 3 or more hours on an average school day watching TV. 52% report spending 3 or more hours playing video or computer games. Again, non-school activities on an average school day. And female students were more likely than males to report this behavior, this 3 hours or more of screen time. So knowing that that's what students are doing, how does that impact their social, emotional, and cognitive development? Let's dive into that a little bit more. So if a young person is spending extensive periods of time online for non-school purposes, it can have a positive impact and cultivate some friendships. So for example, some students or young people are more reserved naturally, and that is okay. So making friendships face-to-face is harder for them, but it allows young people to cultivate friendships in a different way, and maybe with people across the ocean or across the country. So there's something positive with that. There's also reduced loneliness. So especially during the early stages of the pandemic, it reduced loneliness because people were able to connect in different ways, even though we couldn't physically be together. So yes, some positive impacts. But there were fewer opportunities. The more time we spend online, the less time we are interacting face-to-face. And that's how we learn social reciprocity. That's how we learn that give and take of conversation. And we start to learn different nonverbal cues, facial expressions. And it's really how we learn social skills. So when we are not interacting face-to-face, we reduce the ability to do so in person. It's also created difficulties navigating conflicts. So I think about Have you ever texted someone, you think it's totally innocent, but it is read by the other person in a different tone than you intended? Or same could be true for an email. We see that young people experience difficulties really interpreting maybe tone that goes along with that, or that I was joking when I sent a message like that, and it can impact our ability to navigate conflicts face to face. Or we might just ghost someone rather than confronting maybe a challenge or something that we were struggling with that person. So it can have impacts on social connectedness. We also see that it can impact physical development and well-being. So number one, it can result in disrupted sleep. The blue lights suppress a secretion of melatonin in our bodies. This is for young people and adults. So our youth using screens before bed are getting less sleep, and they're getting less REM sleep. That is that sleep, that deep sleep that allows our brains to refresh and continue to grow. When we have reduced sleep, it results in difficulty paying attention and processing information. So I may have gotten 3 hours of sleep, and the next day in class, I'm there. Yes, I'm not on my phone during class, but because I'm tired and fatigued, it results in difficulty focusing on the instruction, retaining that information, because you're not processing it the same way you might if you had 8 or 9 hours of sleep the night before. Disrupted sleep can also result in increased behavioral problems. So think of yourself when you maybe didn't get enough sleep, you have maybe a shorter fuse. You are more easily frustrated with the people that you're working with that day. And you might snap a little bit more, like you might be a little bit more edgy when you're interacting with people. The same is true for our youth. And the more we are on screens, the more I'm sitting in front of my computer or a video game or phone, the less I am physically active. So that can impact my physical health as well. So when we talk about all of those things impacting mental well-being, what we notice with our young people is, Tammy touched on some of these things, but I'll just kind of review that, our social comparison. Typically, we don't post online the bad day that we had. We're posting the great things, the fun things, our best picture of self, right? And so we see that we start to compare ourselves to other people. So if I see that Tammy is constantly out and about, she's going to all these parties and I'm not, what is that doing to my self-esteem? How am I feeling about myself? And she talked about that FOMO, or fear of missing out anxiety. So I'm a young person, I'm seeing all these other people doing things and maybe I'm not doing something that weekend. So I start to kind of think less of myself. We also see that exposure to bullying and harassment, increased symptoms of depression, increased presence of ADHD behaviors, so that inattention, difficulty processing information, and then disciplinary consequences, both at home and at school. So we see that there is this strong tie between technology use and our mental well-being. It's important to note that although rising rates of depression in youth coincide with a rise in smartphone and technology use, it's unclear whether young people are, for example, depressed and isolated, so they're using more screens because they don't have those social connections, or are young people experiencing mental health challenges because they're using screens more. So I have the picture of the chicken and the egg. Which came first? It's a bit unclear, but we do know that we are seeing that rise in depression and other mental health challenges that has corresponded with that rise in technology use, but it is a non-causal relationship. So when do we start to wonder, is this technology use? Am I seeing increased technology use and concerns related to mental health? What we're looking at is whether there is a major change in a youth's thinking, feeling, or behavior that don't go away quickly and last longer than typical emotions. So I say the easiest way to remember this is the technology use or mental health challenge impacting my young person's ability to live, laugh, and love. So as a young person in school, the job is your living is to go to school, get your work done, show up to different activities that you're involved in. When you think of laughing, it's, are they having fun, enjoying life? Not all the time, but able to find enjoyment in daily activities. And love is, are we having, do I have relationships with my family and other friends outside of school, or in school and outside of school? So again, if you're starting to see that impact on live, laugh, and love, that's when you might become concerned. So how do we do that? How do we notice the difference? If you recall, I talked about, where was I just going to go with this? I'm so sorry. I'll get back to that, and we'll go to the next slide for a minute. Sorry, sometimes my brain moves faster than my mouth. So we're looking at signs and symptoms. Signs are things we can see in our young people, and symptoms are things that they might talk about. Signs are always the easier thing because it's what we observe. Symptoms are things that we might hear about. And if you can't see it directly, you can only learn about symptoms if you're talking to your child and really listening and listening non-judgmentally. So Tammy talked a lot about having conversations. This is where you start to learn some of those symptoms through those conversations and listening to your child. You're looking for changes in your child's appearance, behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. And so we're going to talk about some of those. So for appearance, we might see a drastic weight gain or weight loss. You might notice bloodshot eyes or an unkempt appearance. And when I talk about an unkempt appearance, I'm not talking about, on a Saturday, we roll out of bed and you don't shower until later in the day. It's more so long-term, not taking care of hygiene when typically they would have done so. For behavior, we're looking at crying spells, complete withdrawal from others, perhaps non-suicidal self-injury, changes in energy level, use of drugs and alcohol, and a loss of motivation. And then thoughts and feelings, this is where it's different from signs, because these are things that we have to listen to our young people and have conversations to learn about how they're thinking and feeling. But changes in thought patterns that you might see or hear about would be that they're discussing that it's hard to focus or make decisions. Sometimes that's typical. We all struggle to focus on especially less preferred activities, but if it's that ongoing concern, we'd worry a little bit more. They might be talking about racing thoughts or delusions, hallucinations, or just being very critical of self. And then for feelings, you may observe or hear your child discuss that they are depressed or they're having long-lasting mood swings. We talked about mood swings being typical in adolescence, but you're seeing those maybe more frequently. That excessive irritability or anger, a flat affect or lack of emotional response, or feeling helpless or hopeless. So these are some of the things you want to start to pay attention to in your young person. So when do we become worried? How do you differentiate between typical adolescent development and those warning signs and symptoms that I just talked about? You're looking at three major things. So frequency, am I noticing these concerns related to technology use or mental health most days rather than one day in isolation, or we all have bad days or 2 days in a row? Am I seeing this longer duration? Have I been noticing these concerning behaviors that last for extended periods of time? And am I noticing an impact? So is my technology use impacting, for example, my interactions with people outside of the home? Am I gaming for so many hours a day that I've stopped turning down my friends to go meet them? Or am I so isolated that I'm not leaving my bedroom and I'm withdrawing from other activities? So again, that impact on your young person's ability to live, laugh, and love. That's the easiest way to remember that. So I've covered a lot of this. We're going to talk about what you can do to support wellness and kind of be proactive in a minute, but I know Tammy's going to cover some of her technology summaries and some steps you can take. I'm going to cover kind of some overview summary points for student well-being and some steps you can take, and then we're going to answer questions. I know there's been a lot of questions coming through the chat, but I'm not good at multitasking. I don't think Tammy can read the questions and answer at the same time either. So I'll turn it over to her, but then I'll be back in a minute.
Thank you, Bethany. All right, so to kind of summarize some of the most important key points that we talked about today in relation to technology, we want you to leave here remembering that your child's internet experience is different than yours because of personalization algorithms. We want you to understand that the content your kids are engaging with online really does matter. And being sure that the media, the apps, and the games that they use are healthy and age appropriate and pro-social is really important. And when I say pro-social, what that means is that the content has characters that are displaying empathy, kindness, they're portraying adults as dependable, doesn't have violence or mature content that children are not ready for. That really makes a difference. Using routines in your household are really important because, as Bethany told you about that brain development, we can't expect our kids to manage those things on their own. We can't expect a 10-year-old to, manage their screen time, but we can teach them routines, and routines over time help them develop healthy habits. So set up some good, healthy routines that your whole family engages in and use them over and over and over so that it becomes a habit. Something else that's really important, and this is a tricky one, people don't like to hear this one, but it's not recommended to use technology to soothe or reward your child. What this does is it can set up power struggles in the house if they don't earn it, which is no fun for anyone. But in addition to that, it can really inhibit their development of healthy coping mechanisms. And then as a teen and an adult, they're going to want to go to that technology to escape uncomfortable feelings all the time. So it's really important that tech isn't used to soothe or reward. Now think about this in church or a restaurant or shopping, right? It's really easy to hand over an iPad or a phone to a child to soothe them and their boredom in those activities. But those are the places where they learn the norms of social behavior. They learn language as young children. They learn to engage with community members. And when we hand them those devices, what we're doing is removing them from that interaction with people. So they zone out and they don't develop that ability to have that social emotional reciprocity we talked about. They're not learning about, products in the grocery store and having those fun conversations that you can have, games you can play in the car, those kinds of things. Now, I'm not saying if you're on a road trip to Florida and you're going to be driving for 20 hours that a movie on the way isn't appropriate. It is. But what I am saying is when we soothe our children with technology, we are teaching them that technology is the way to escape things that aren't comfortable. The next point is that when we use technology with our kids, it gives us a chance to show interest in what they care about. It's a great bonding experience. It gives us a chance to build our relationships and laugh together with them, especially if we're playing a game and there's some fun competition or strategy. mean, those are really important experiences, and your kid cares whether, you're present and interested in what they're doing. But it also gives you a chance to really monitor what are they being exposed to, not only information wise, but also people. It helps you to teach them problem solving when they maybe, a sticky situation comes up in a multiplayer game, or it might help them tune into how their time on technology is impacting their health and well-being, and develop some more self-regulation strategies. So when possible, it's important to use that technology and media with your child. It's about bonding, but also information gathering on your part. And also remember, this isn't just a kid problem. Adults struggle with all of this too. And we have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. So imagine how much harder it is for your kids. But it's okay to show vulnerability to your children. It's okay to share your goals around your own wellness and what you struggle with in relation to your tech use. Make a plan together. Help your kids help you be accountable, and you can help them be accountable. So it's okay to show your humanity, right? This is something that all of humanity is struggling with. So choose high quality content. We have a great link here to some resources that can help you learn about content, whether it's a game, a movie, a book, an app. We have some great review sites, the Common Sense Media Reviews and the Entertainment Software Ratings Board will give you information to help you make decisions and know what to look for. And again, when you're choosing that content, use pro-social content and avoid violent and mature content. We do recommend that parents follow the American Academy of Pediatrics screen time recommendations, especially for kids under 5. Under 5, it is very clear what the research says. It's about an hour or less a day for kids that are 3 to 5 years old. And from 0 to 2, no screen time at all, except video conferencing with loved ones or looking at photos. And even then, that should be done to a limited degree. 5 and over, what matters more is the type of activities they're engaged in. So are they active? Are they creating? Creation activities use a completely different part of the brain than passive activities. So scrolling passively on social media, those are more mind-numbing behaviors versus I'm going to create a pamphlet or a flyer or a video to explain something to someone. Very different types of activities. So favoring that educational creation time over passive time is really important. You want to make sure that you have clear and consistent expectations. And that link that you have there is going to take you to some great resources that can help you with that. I just happened to revisit the Family Media Plan website that the American Academy of Pediatrics has. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised that they've recently updated it. Much, much better than it used to be before. And I highly recommend it. It's going to walk you through a lot of different things to think about. And it'll let you make choices. And at the end, you have something you can print, like a set of agreements that you can print for your family. But very educational, but also very, very helpful to you as well. So definitely check that out. And again, when you're noticing challenges in your kids, what we really have to do is build skills. So if your child is posting content, they shouldn't be like racy content. The skill they need is probably going to be like impulse control or, planning for the future, those kinds of skills. If your child is having trouble getting off the computer, what they really need are some more of those self-regulatory behaviors and maybe some skill building around paying attention to their body and how it feels. So think of challenges as opportunities to build skills. And lastly, don't wait for something to happen to have conversations. Make having conversations a normal part of your everyday family life. Because what happens when we wait to have these conversations, when something goes wrong, kids are closed off. They're not open, and it feels like they're bad people. So we want to make sure that we're having these conversations all the time. I'm going to also share with you, this comes from Common Sense Media, and this is something in school that we work with kids on all the time. These are dispositions that we want to develop in kids. We want to develop their ability to slow down and self-reflect. We want them to explore perspectives. We want them to know how to seek facts and evidence. We want them, when faced with a complex situation online, we want them to envision their options and the possible impacts before they take action. And so this can apply to anything. It can apply to digital drama. It could apply to, oh, I'm going to just take this person's paper and claim that it's my own and turn it in. I mean, it literally can apply to any complex dilemma that happens in life, online or offline. But we really do use these regularly in our classrooms to try to build working memory in kids around this routine of slowing down, reflecting, thinking about perspectives, gathering the evidence, envisioning the options they have before they make a decision. So this might be something that would be helpful in your home as well. I'm going to turn it back over to Bethany now, and she's going to review some summary points about wellness.
Thanks, Tammy. And one of the comments I saw in the chat while Tammy was speaking was around, is this applicable to younger children as well? Yes, so although I talked about some of the changes that occur during adolescence, think about how that impacts your younger child in the sense that their brain is even less developed than that of an adolescent. And so it's so important to facilitate those skills that Tammy was talking about, relationship skills, problem solving skills, and really engaging together in technology use at a younger age. To summarize a little bit, excessive technology use impacts a young person's wellness because it's having an impact on their development, their social and cognitive development, especially. There's adolescence and childhood is a time of significant change. So as adults, both at the school and at home, it's so important that we recognize that there's a lot of change occurring. It's hard to navigate a lot of the situations that young people are going through, especially when it comes to online interactions, and that they need some of our help. Like they can't manage all of these things on their own. Mental health challenges involve a major change in a young person's thinking, feeling, and behavior. So you're really focusing on those things. And then you're paying attention to frequency, duration, and impact of changes on your child's daily functioning. So again, for adolescents, but also children, how are some of these things, those warning signs we talked about, impacting daily functioning? So what can we do about this? How can we be proactive? How can we support our young people as they are managing what's happening online and their engagement with others? I like to focus on building resiliency. So resiliency is the ability to recover quickly from difficulties. I like to think of images of a trampoline or a rubber band. It's the ability to bounce back, right? A rubber band, if you stretch it, it bounces back. So how can we help our kids to bounce back from difficult situations? This wheel was developed by a woman named Nan Henderson, and what it shows is that when we build resilience, it mitigates other risk factors for our kids. So we can build resilience by providing opportunities for meaningful participation, increasing pro-social bonding, setting clear and consistent boundaries. That's a big one that Tammy was talking about with technology use. Teaching life skills. So again, that goes to modeling how we use our own technology and how we cope with challenges rather than picking up our phone. I like to talk about if I come home after a bad day at work, am I resorting to sitting and scrolling for 2 hours? Or am I modeling that, man, I had a tough day, let's all go for a walk together, or let's cook dinner together. Providing caring and support, which is a natural part of parenting, and setting and communicating high expectations. So let's talk a little bit more about some of those protective factors that we can build in our young people so that they become more resilient. In Fairfax County, I talked about that youth survey that young people complete in grades 6, 8, 10, and 12 that not only looks at risky behaviors, but positive protective factors, and how can we build those? What we know is, and I'm going to show you some pretty interesting data, is that when we build protective factors in young people, they become more resilient and they are better able to manage stress, make better choices, and develop healthy habits. And this all applies to technology use as well. We're going to talk about some of those things that you can do at home that don't cost money, that can build protective factors in children. So Tammy, if you can go the next one. Parents can build protective factors in their children by being available to help. So being that person that if your child comes to you out of a concern for themselves or a friend, you're there and consistently available to provide some guidance. Knowing your child's whereabouts. This does reference kind of that physical whereabouts, but I look at this as kind of twofold because it's important to know what our kids are looking at online as well. And knowing what they're doing, who they're interacting with, not stalking too much, but having some awareness. Involving your children in family decision-making. This does not mean they get to decide how a paycheck is spent, but maybe they're helping you plan what they're going to have for dinner. What are they going to pack for lunch? What are we going to do this weekend? Maybe which park are we going to go to? So including them in some of those decision-making discussions, because it allows them to kind of feel like they're a part of the family and see how to weigh different options, do some problem solving as to what we're going to do together. Just by showing respect for every member of the family, treating everybody respectfully, they are learning positive personal relationship skills. They're learning how to resolve conflict in a respectful manner, a huge protective factor. And then communicating clear approval of drug and alcohol use. I use the example of not being the family who wants to host the party because then they know what their kids are getting into. That's sending a message that it's okay to drink or use drugs. If we set that clear boundary, it's a significant protective factor. And there's some great research on that we're not going to get into today. So this is, I'm going to explain what this chart looks at. This is again from the youth survey information, but when we build protective factors, so the bottom, that is the x-axis where it says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the number of protective factors that young people reported having in their life. When they have 0, young people are more likely to engage in risky behaviors, which include having sex, using drugs and alcohol, bullying someone, carrying a weapon, binge drinking, vape use, and being involved in a gang. But when we build those family assets, those protective factors I just reviewed with you, once we get up to 3 protective factors, you see a significant decrease in all of those risky behaviors. And the same goes for technology use in a negative way, not that positive engagement with technology, but any of those risky behaviors, bullying online, those decline as we build protective factors. So those are some interesting data. And Tammy, on the next slide, I will show similarly, this is looking at how when we build protective factors in our young people, they report less mental health challenges in the past year. So the 3 lines are looking at persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, considering suicide, and attempting suicide. So regardless of the reason for those feelings, when we build those protective factors, we create resilient young people who can bounce back from challenges, and they are less likely to experience those mental health challenges. I showed you the protective factors that families can build. The same is true for schools and building those same protective factors individually. So as a young person, I can persevere, and that's a protective factor as well. Not covering all of that, but there are links at the end where you can look at more information as to how we can build those protective factors in our children. So we do have a lot of resources here. Some are about building resilience, but some are about different mental health resources. I do want to put a plug. We didn't discuss this fully, but if you are worried about your child, you can always reach out to the school. Every school building has a school counselor, social worker, and psychologist in each school building. So I encourage you to reach out to them if you need help. I know Tammy also talked about reaching out to the school for some guidance related to use of different technology applications. So there are lots of resources at the school level. And then on here, the FCPS mental health resources has crisis resources if you are worried about your child's immediate safety. So know that those are there. All right, so I think we are going to get to some questions and answers at this point.
Thank you, Tammy and Bethany. We are so thankful to have your wealth of experience and background. And as you all shared, there's a lot of additional follow-up resources, and you all are phenomenal, and we're here to support as well. But to get into some of the questions that we have on the chat, and we're open to others if people have them. But we have a couple of questions around the filtering that FCPS does on YouTube, and if that's available to families at home. And while addressing that, if you can give guidance, I know you've shared common sense media, but any other suggestions for parental control guidance would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I can take this one. So if you gave permission for your child at the beginning of the year, when we send home the permission information about all the technologies that are used in our school, YouTube falls under what's called a Google Additional Service. So if you gave permission for your child to use YouTube, it doesn't matter if they're using a school device or a personal device. If they log into YouTube using their @fcpsschools.net account, which is their Google account for school, they'll get the same YouTube experience that they would at school. So have your child log in, and then they'll have that same experience. What you should notice is, we're able to implement stricter filtering. It doesn't mean that, they won't encounter anything inappropriate on there, but I mean, it drastically reduces the chance of them, engaging in something like that. They'd really have to dig to find things. But it also removes the related videos that pop up on the side that tend to lead to the rabbit hole. It does not mean they can create a channel. They won't be able to do that. They're not going to be able to comment on videos or anything like that. But when they log in, it allows us to do a little bit more in terms of making it a more education focused tool. And then the second half of that question, could you repeat that again?
So how to find guidance on parental controls for various sites, since there are so many different apps out there, parents could use all the help they can get.
Sure. So I'm going to share my screen here for a second again. On the last slide, you will get a link to some of the parental control resources. So I put together, this is called a Padlet. And a Padlet is really just a way to build a board with a collection of links. Now, this might look a little bit overwhelming, but what I want you to pay attention to are the categories up here at the top. So if you're interested in learning about the features and the content of apps, games, movies, videos, etc., this column is going to take you to resources that will help you assess things before you let your kid use them. So again, it's going to connect you to this page is going to tell you what you should be thinking about and looking for. This is going to actually give you some reviews. And I think you get 3 free reviews, and then Common Sense recently went to a subscription service. I don't think it's real expensive per month, but you can get some free ones. And then the Entertainment Software Ratings Board is another place where you can go, and that one's focused more on games. So these will help you kind of assess what's age appropriate and what your child might encounter. Now, in terms of parental controls are a lot more complicated because they can be controlled at the internet service provider level. They can be controlled on the actual device itself, within the system, like whether it's a gaming system or a social media system. It could be controlled at the browser level. So there's a lot of different options here. Wish I could tell you this was an easy thing. It's not. So what I want you to know here is your family only uses so many products, right? So you're either a Comcast family, a Cox family, or you're a Verizon family. You don't need to pay attention to the ones that your family doesn't use. For phones, typically people are either Apple or Android. So if you're an Apple, the top links here are going to help you. And if you're an Android user, the bottom links are going to help you. Gaming system, this Parent's Guide, Ultimate Guide to Parental Controls is extremely helpful for understanding gaming systems. But what I do want to show you, let me come back here to the Entertainment Software Ratings Board. When you want to set up parental controls on gaming systems, they give you everything you need to know here. So it asks what you want to control. And then when you scroll down, every type of device there is, they have instructions for how to control those things. So if you have a Nintendo Switch and you want to know how to control things, this is what you have the ability to control. And then it gives you instructions on how to do it. So that's pretty awesome for gaming systems. When it comes to browsers, there is some directions online about how to set up Chrome Safe Search on your home computer. Microsoft Edge also has a kids mode. Safari has some parental controls that you can use as well. If you have kids that are 10 and under, and YouTube is a real problem in your household, I'm going to suggest that you check out Sensical. Sensical was created by Common Sense Education. It has a lot of the same content that kids love from YouTube, but it's not YouTube. So everything that's on that channel has been analyzed by child development experts and tagged with what ages it's appropriate for. And as a parent, you go to Sensical first, you create your parent account, you set up a profile for each of your children with their ages. And with that, once the kid logs in, they will only be shown content that is deemed appropriate for that age. And you have the ability to set a timer, so it cuts out. And all of that's free. So I highly recommend, if YouTube is a challenge, set up Sensical for your kids. YouTube does have, YouTube Kids is also available, and there's some parental controls there. We have parental controls for Netflix, Hulu, Apple, and anything that isn't on this Padlet, you can find it. I mean, all the streaming services pretty much have them. So you will have access to this Padlet, and to go to any of these links, you just click on the card and it'll take you right there. So you kind of have like a little dashboard of a place to get information. So I hope that was helpful.
Absolutely. And we included the link to that Padlet in the chat, and we will be sending out resources via email shortly. So I just want to encourage everyone. I know there's lots of questions. We are here to support you individually, however we can offer support. So please know that whatever we don't get to today, there's a lot of resources out there to help navigate this. Speaking of, a couple of people were curious about what is being done in schools to help support this topic, teaching digital citizenship, modeling it in the classroom, especially since teachers have some really engaging tech lessons sometimes. What are we doing as a school system to encourage positive digital relationships?
So I guess I can take that one too, since it's focused on tech, but Bethany, jump in if you have anything at all that you want to add. So there's a couple different things, and there's many layers to our approach. So I'm going to share my screen again with you, just to show you a few things. And hold on just a second here. I have too many windows open, so I'm getting lost in my computer. Okay. There we go. Okay, first, what I want you to know is we do a lot behind the scenes that nobody would ever really notice, I guess you would say. Hold on, I'm still not sharing my screen, am I?
You're not yet.
Yeah, sorry. Like I said, I'm lost in my windows.
Well, how about,
there we go.
do you want, oh, you got it?
I got it now. Sorry. Okay. So what you should be looking at here is our digital ecosystem library. This is available to parents and kids. And this basically is things that happen behind the scenes that, you know, most people don't even realize Fairfax does. Anytime we want to add a tool to our digital ecosystem, it goes through a pretty rigorous process where we evaluate the instructional value of the tool. And then it goes also through a technical review to make sure that it will work appropriately within our environment. And not everything gets approved. We often review things and say, nope, this isn't healthy for kids, and we're not going to use it. Sometimes we find tools that are really great, but we have to put conditions on their use. And some of them require parental permission. So we pay attention to the terms of service. We also work really hard to put data privacy agreements in place with as many companies as we can. And when we can't, we ask for parent permission. So this is a place you could go to learn what tools are available. It doesn't mean our teachers are using all of these tools, but they're available in our ecosystem. And so you just click, if you want to know more about Ally, for instance, you can go there and you can learn more about it. You can see whether it's approved and whether it has conditions. Like Ally is something that would not require parental consent because we have a data confidentiality agreement. So how is this connected to digital citizenship? We do this because we want to protect our kids' data. And we want to make sure that what we're using is really sound. In terms of teaching kids, digital citizenship, you know, it's such a complex topic because there's health-related impacts. We have to teach media literacy. We have to teach how to navigate online relationships. We have to teach how to protect your privacy and your data. You know, it's a big topic. So it's embedded in library curriculum. It's embedded in our health and PE curriculum. It's embedded in our language arts curriculum. It's embedded in our social studies curriculum. In addition, all schools in all of our elementary schools will be using what's called morning meeting. And during morning meeting, we do a lot of social emotional skill building. And we also embed digital citizenship in our social emotional learning work. Because a lot, you know, as you heard today, there is a lot of connections between being able to navigate the online space and our kids' ability to develop healthy social, emotional, and wellness. At our high schools, they have advisory period. And during advisory period, we're also embedding a lot of digital citizenship work in there as well. What you might also notice, every year in October, we do Digital Citizenship Week, where we ask schools to place some additional focus and do some additional work during that week. Just so happens next week is Digital Citizenship Week. So, you know, you can check out Twitter, the hashtag you would search for if you want to see some of the things that are happening in our schools is hashtag FCPS DIG CIT, CIT. So check that out, starts on Monday. You might also get some information sent home We have like parent information that we're asking schools to send home so that you can connect to what your child might have learned at school that day and continue the learning at home. So hopefully you'll be getting some of those messages from your child's school. And if you have any other questions about how your specific school does it, I encourage you to call your school. Reach out, ask how they're educating your kids, and then you'll get more school specific information, because I work at the district level, so I don't have intimate knowledge about what each school does, but that is our approach, to embed it really everywhere. So hopefully that answered your question.
Just to piggyback, Tammy, one thing specifically, because you did talk about this very early in the presentation, but one of those kind of focuses in health and PE is around human trafficking, since technology is often utilized as a means to recruit young people for that. So there is a specific focus on that built into the health and PE curriculum as well.
And that leads us into our next question, which is, how do we communicate these dangers to kids without scaring them? While also, if something is telling us something is going wrong, what do you recommend we do as parents? So on one hand, cautioning kids of the dangers, on the other, what to do if we see something that's concerning.
Can I start out, Tammy, and then you chime in? All right, great. So I think the first thing to consider in having conversations with your children is thinking about developmental level, and cautioning, having conversations that are developmentally appropriate. So you're clearly not going to talk about human trafficking with a second grader. However, you can talk about the content that they are viewing. What are you watching? What did you learn about? Hearing what they're having to say. And I think that the other piece is talking to your kids about what they're seeing online, because once they tell you, it gives you that in to open the conversation about what they're looking at, what they're viewing, what they're seeing on TikTok, and also considering, sorry, there's sirens going by, that you can say, especially if you have an older child, hey, have you seen concerning things online? What has happened? And let them open the door and introduce the topic. You're not going to put these ideas in their mind, especially as they're older. They've probably been exposed to things already that you were unsure of or didn't know that they might see. So seeing different things about drugs that are online, or seeing kids getting bullied online, ask them if they've encountered that. How did that make you feel? What could we do to support the person who, might have experienced the bullying? On top of that, oh, Tammy, did you want to go before I talk about? Okay.
Oh,
the other piece is what to do. So if you see something online that was posted by maybe one of their friends and you're worried, it could be about their wellness, or it could be about drug distribution in the school building, or something posted about a weapon. FCPS has an anonymous tip line. It's a 24 hour, 7 day a week online platform, text line, or phone number that can be utilized to report things. And I can give you an example of how that might work. If you see one of your child's friends post that they are thinking about suicide, you could report that anonymously. And if it's during the school day, the school will be contacted. A school-based mental health professional will connect with them immediately. If it's outside of school hours, they'd be connected with resources immediately as well. So it's a great option. It's a good way of reporting things. And again, then having those follow-up conversations with your child that they can report those concerns. Who are the trusted adults that they know that if they see something that's upsetting online, or they're worried about somebody else, who can they go to talk to at school, at home, in the community? Trusted adults are so important, because then we can help manage the response to those situations. Tammy, I don't know if you had anything else.
Yeah, I would just add that making these conversations a part of your family's norm and having them often will help your kids open up. If you wait to start talking until something happens, like I said, then it feels like they've done something really wrong and they're going to close up. So the other piece is humanize it. It's not that just kids that have these problems that happen online. You can, point out to your child, gosh, I was curious about, I heard, someone we know was having a problem with drugs. And so I wanted to learn a little bit more about it. And now I'm noticing I'm getting all of this information sent to me about drugs or rehab or whatever, whatever the topic is. Help your kids understand why that happens and how that can be helpful and how it can be harmful. We did a lot of talking about that today. So I think humanizing and, when you're having feelings or trouble with social media, it's not like adults are immune to that. It's okay to humanize it. And we also need to model the behavior we want to see. So if we are having struggles online, it's really important that we're using our own self-regulation. The last thing we would want to have is our kids see an example from their parent or family member that isn't a positive example.
That is such an important reminder. So if you all don't mind, we're coming to a close. So if you have any last thoughts, you're welcome to share that. But I did also want to bring up, because we saw this in a few of the questions that came in, is how do we deal with the every other kid has this from our kids? So, when they feel like we're saying no or setting up a boundary and they feel like it's unreasonable based on what their friends are going through, what suggestions might you have for approaching that? And then please share any of your last thoughts before we wrap up.
Well, I guess, this is a really hard question. And, we acknowledge that there is tremendous social pressure. But the thing is, there's needs and there's wants, right? Just because they want it doesn't mean that they need to have it. And so if they are feeling tremendous social pressure and you're not ready to go the phone route or whatever, acknowledge that it's important to them for their social connection, and then offer additional ways for them to connect with their friends. Host, hangouts at your house, schedule trips to go hiking with friends, do everything you can to help them form those bonds and connections that they're craving. The other thing is create a pathway for them to get where they want to be. But along that pathway, they've got to learn the skills. And so that might mean you find an online course that you take together about safety. I mean, we have a lot of good resources up on our DigSit site. There's a lot of paid things that you can do that you could work through as a family. And so, when we create a pathway, it incentivizes the learning also. So, that might be something that you might try. You can also maybe, if they really want to use something that's not so great, but there are some parental controls you could use to make it more manageable and safe, then you could explain to them, yes, however, we're turning off the ability to share, or we're turning off the ability to chat until we have time to work with you on our expectations, and also making sure you have the skills you need to navigate this safely and appropriately. So I think those are some things that parents can do. And there's a lot of new products that are coming out. I think one of them I was reading about, and I'm not recommending it because I don't know a lot about it, but it's an interesting phone. It's called Troomi, Troomi. And it seems like it's a very kid-focused phone with a lot more options that parents seem to want. So, look online. There are other products. You don't have to get a full-blown smartphone for your child. I mean, some phones will come with text and messaging and things like that kids want, but it's not going to have access to social media apps or other things. So, there's a lot of resources out there, and there's more coming out every day. So, just do your homework.
And just to chime in, I know we're near the end, but two of those factors that build resiliency are, one, setting clear boundaries for your child, and two, giving them the opportunity to participate in decision making. Those go together because part of what you can develop as a family is that social or that contract when it comes to using technology. And the reality is you are the parent. You typically are the one that purchased that phone. And so it's okay that if you establish together that you should have access to their password. And if you don't, is it a natural consequence that they don't get access to their phone for some amount of time? Setting that boundary of putting all technology, checking it in at night. I had a friend that would do that with her kid, and she tells a story of him army crawling into the middle of the room to like get the phone in the middle of the night, but then he lost technology during the day for a few days, right? So what are the boundaries? What are the expectations around technology use? Working together to come up with a reasonable contract together, and following through when maybe they're abusing technology in a way that you're not okay with as a parent. So I think that interaction is important.
And I think the last thing that I want to say is just I want to reiterate that brain development piece. I wish I could tell you that, we can do these things one or two times and then our kids are going to magically be the perfect users of technology. It's going to be work from now until they're an adult. And even as an adult, they're probably still going to have some struggles with it. So it is a journey. It is a process. And what you want to do is enjoy that journey and help your kids develop as many skills as you can while you have that influence over them. So it's hard work, but it's important work. And we really hope that everything we've provided you with today better equips you with some tools, resources. Maybe you have some more questions you want to go research on your own. I hope that what we've helped provide today is valuable to you. So thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. This will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out this information and the link to all registrants that are here to support you on any way we can. Have a great rest of your day.